Starts on page 246, grade your 5-1 while you're working on your 5-2 later on in class. Today is not a whole lot different than last time. It's really not different at all, except you have to answer one more thing. You needed the parabola graph. Enjoy this last day, because next time it will get more difficult. This is graphing still. Still use your calculators on this. It's factoring in section 5.3. That will be a little more tricky for some. So enjoy this day. Probably will be able to get most of this done in class or close to it anyway. What you are looking for, as I told you last time when we were looking ahead, is where does the parabola cross the x-axis? That's what the rest of this chapter, every section pretty much, is finding out where it crosses. So the first method we are covering is graphing. You can graph it and just see where it crosses the x-axis. So today you will graph just like you did in 5.1, but you just have to tell me then where it crosses. That's the extra little part that we're adding into it. There are a couple of words on page 246 that you need to know. They all mean the same thing, basically. Roots, zeros, solutions, answers, all of those things, and your book will use them interchangeably, and so will I. They all mean the same thing. Where it crosses. The x-axis. That is what you are looking for. You need to keep that in your mind as you're working through all these problems. That's what you're trying to find, where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So once you've got it graphed, it really shouldn't be too difficult to figure that out, especially on your calculator. It will tell you where it crosses the x-axis. Next thing to cover is at the top of page 247, your possibilities. Some of the ones that we graphed last time probably passed right through the x-axis twice. And there are two real answers there. Or two real roots. Doesn't matter which way we say it. We know what we're talking about is where it's crossing. There are two real roots, two real answers there. So your answer to this question may be 1 and 4. I don't know, just kind of where they look like they might be crossing. So that would be your final answer to the question. Where is it crossing? It crosses where x equals 1 and 4. So then another possibility, sometimes parabola will just come down and touch the x-axis, so it doesn't actually even cross, really. It just intersects it right there and then turns around and goes back up. So how many times does it touch right there? Would you guess? Just one time. So that is just one answer. So for that one, you have one real, and we usually call that a double root because it counts twice. It counts twice, so we usually call it a double root. It's only one number. A lot of times we'll circle that so we know what that is a double root. It counts as 2. And then the other possibility is that it doesn't cross at all. It never intersects the x-axis. So if you were telling me where does that one cross, what would you tell me? It doesn't. So no, and this is important, no real solution. No real solution. The reason that's important is because later in the chapter we will cover imaginary numbers. You can get imaginary solutions to that. So we'll get to that later, but as far as you know right now, there is no real solution to that, and that's all you need to know right now. So those are the 3 possible answers that you will get today after you get the equations graphed. Questions on that before we go on? So today you'll be graphing much like you graphed last time, and then simply telling me where it crosses. X squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Most of the functions for the rest of the chapter will be set equal to 0. That's what we're trying to find. That's why we call them zeros, because we're setting this quadratic function equal to 0 to find out where x equals 0, where it crosses the x-axis. So you're going to go through the same steps that we went through last time. Finding the y-intercept first, we make the x is 0, and what would we get for the y-intercept? -4. So that's the first thing we could graph. You could come right over here on the y-axis and graph -4. Next thing we find is the axis. And I want to clarify one thing on that, or make it a little simpler, I think, as far as your positive and negative. Just put the opposite of B. Don't worry about the negative out front. Whatever B is, put the opposite. So look at that as the opposite of B over 2A. The opposite of B over 2A. So what is our B? -3, so the opposite would be 3 over 2 times 1, or 3/2. That's your x value. So if you don't know where 3/2 is at, or maybe it would end up being like, can't think of anything right now, 7 over 3, and you don't know where that was at, type it in your calculator and get a decimal. You'll be able to figure that out. 3/2 would be 1.5 or 1.5. So that's where your axis would go, right down the middle between 1 and 3. And then in order to find the vertex, what do we do? Plug that in for the x. So 3/2 squared minus 3 times 3/2 minus 4. Let's be typing that in. Figuring it out. You can type in the original, or you can type that part in. 6.25, and that fraction would be, and not mixed number, the improper fraction. Anyone? So your vertex then is 3/2 -25 over 4. And you already said that was 6 1/4. So on your axis, go down to 6 1/4 and put your vertex point. And then we can use symmetry to plot this point. So this is 1.5 from here. So you go 1.5 the other way and put your point. Now, here's the problem with today that you didn't have last time, and all you had to do last time was sketch the graph. If you had those many points, maybe you'd get one more in here somewhere and sketch it. But if you just sketch that right now, what are you not going to know? Where it crosses. You're not going to know exactly where it's going to cross the x-axis. So, here's how we figured that out on your calculators that we should all have. Go ahead and type that in, and you should be able to graph that, the original function. Make sure you have an equal sign. We've been doing inequalities now for 1, so they may be switched to inequalities. Make sure yours is an equal. X squared minus 3x minus 4. And once you hit graph, you should see, hopefully, that the one in the calculator matches up to the one that you're doing on your paper right now. Right above the trace button, right over here towards the right-hand side top of your calculator. What does that say? Right above the trace button. What? Cal. We want to calculate the zero. So when you're on your graph screen there, if you push second trace, it's going to bring up the calculate menu. So you have a list of things we want to calculate. Which one of those do we want to find out? Zero. So you go down to 2, and you push enter. Now don't push anything else until I tell you. You can tell by looking at that, where does it look like that crosses on the graph? -1 and 4. Looks like it probably does. We're still going to find out for sure. I'm going to go ahead and sketch mine because this one does cross at those two places. So now you can see. But once you push calculate, it should say right down here left bound. And somewhere on the parabola, you've got a little blinking cursor. So you know that right here, there is a 0. And you think it's at -1, and it is. But you may not be sure all the time, especially when it doesn't go right through the middle of 1. So when it says left bound, it's going to find the 0 for you. You just have to tell it where you want it to look. So for left bound, you need to pick a point anywhere along this side. It's on the left side of that 0 that you're looking for. So you just use your arrow to the left and move over to where that blinking cursor is right up in this area somewhere. Once you've got it there, it doesn't have to be anywhere specific. It just has to be on that side. Push enter. And it's going to mark that spot for you. It's going to put a little arrow up here somewhere on your screen showing that that's the left-hand side. And now it's changed to right bound. Wants to know what the right-hand side is. So you go down below to anywhere in here on the other side. So move your cursor down there and push enter, and it will mark it again. And then you'll have 2 arrows up there saying we want the calculator to look in between those 2 points for a 0. And now it says guess. That's what you want it to do. Guess the 0 between there. Push enter one more time, and it will tell you what x equals. And what does it say? -1. So that is, in fact, the answer to that one is -1. So let's go over and do the other side. So hit second calculate one more time. Go to 0. You want to go to 0. You want to find the 0, and it brings up the left bound part again. Now, here's where you think it is. So the left bound, the left side, you're going to mark anywhere in here. Put your cursor anywhere in there. So you'll have to move over there. Doesn't matter where, as long as it's on the left side or the bottom side. Push enter, and push your arrow up. So then cross up here to the top side somewhere and push enter. And it will put your 2 arrows. And then hit enter the 3rd time for it to guess. And what do we get? What does it tell us? X equals 4. So your final answer for that, x equals -1 and 4. Those are the 2 roots to the problem, 2 solutions where it crosses the x. And then, since you haven't drawn your graphs yet, some of you probably, go ahead and mark those 2 points, because they are points, and sketch your graph. Any questions?